All right, so I think for my last dimensioning example video, and I suppose I might do more if you have specific questions. If you email me and have specific questions, I could always do more. But the last one that I think I'm going to do, at least on my own account, is going to be this example here. So here we have an object, and actually we have two front views here, right? And then a full section right side view. And you can see that we have three what are countersink holes. One, two, three countersink holes arranged around here. So it's a little bit different. And I thought it'd be good to just give you an example of that. So the first thing that we really got to do here is we have to get rid of one of these views. And while they're both technically correct, this view kind of comes off here at an angle, and maybe that's a little unnecessary. I like this. In fact, we could have a third option where we just don't do any cutting plane line. Because remember, with a full section view, the cutting plane line is optional. So maybe I'll do that one. Maybe that would be good. So I'll, let's erase this one, right? Because we're not going to use that one. And let's take this, and I'm just going to change it to a center line, right? And in which case then I can get rid of these arrows and maybe bring this down a little bit. That's a little bit too far. So we'll go like that. I'll just eyeball it here. You guys know where you can find that distance here. There we go. So there we go. Now it's a little bit far apart, so let's move this a little bit closer. And again, we can always adjust this. Okay, so there we go. All right. So now, following our workflow, okay, we have the drawing completed. Now we're ready to move on to the dimensioning. So we're going to choose our layout, and I'm going to choose the ANSI B. And let's see what that is. 1:1 is fine for this. By the way, you can see this is a slightly older drawing, right? So this is a little bit different than what our layouts would be, but it's not really going to make a big difference for what we're going to do. Although I do want to maybe move it up a little bit, because I think I'm going to have the dimensions along the bottom, at least here. Okay, so now I'm going to lock that. All right, and we'll go back to our model space and make sure this is set at 1:1, right, which it is. And now I'm going to change my dimension to the dimension, my layer to the dimension layer, and I'm ready to get going. All right, so what is this part made up of? How many different primitive features can I identify? Okay, so we have a large cylinder right here. The outside here is a positive cylinder. Then we have a smaller negative cylinder, which would be right here, right? That's a negative, excuse me, not a negative cylinder, a smaller positive cylinder. Okay, so we have two cylinders, a large positive cylinder and a small positive cylinder. Then we have a negative cylinder here, a large negative cylinder, right? That hole is a negative cylinder. And then we have a smaller negative cylinder right there, okay? We have this is kind of like an annular ring, a negative rectangular ring. I'm not going to get too fancy with the names. As long as I account for it and give it some name, then I should be okay. And then finally, we have our three countersink holes, okay? So let's get started. Let's do the dimensioning, and the first thing I want to do is the large cylinder. And remember, cylinders should be dimensioned in their rectangular view, so I'm going to dimension that here. And we go just like this. And we can't forget double click, %C. Don't forget your diameter symbols on your cylinders. And then we need a thickness for that, or a height for that. Okay. And then we need a dimension for the small positive cylinder right there. Again, in the rectangular view, and don't forget your diameter symbol. And now we need a height for that. And here, just like we talked about before, we have two options. We can either do this overall option, or we can do this. Okay. I'll pull this out here so it looks a little bit nicer. Okay. So we either have this dimension or this dimension. We cannot do both. You cannot do both dimensions. All right. So do we want this dimension or do we want this dimension? And again, I'm going to opt for the overall dimension. Okay. And in fact, I should make it clear, of these three dimensions, the 2, the 1, and the 3 right here, of these three dimensions, really, any 2 is sufficient. A third dimension would be over-dimensioning. So any 2, and to be precise, we should pick which 2 based on the function and mating relationship. Again, because we don't know that. So, we kind of have to guess. But let's just say that this cylinder right here, the 2.06 cylinder, fit into a hole, right? And the hole was of a depth 1. So then I might just get rid of the 2 and leave the 1 and the 3. And in fact, I'll do that just to shake things up and to make it look a little bit different. All right. So that's fine. So I got the 2 cylinders dimension. Now I have the negative cylinder here. So the large negative cylinder. Now I'm going to show you something here. So let's do that. I would normally dimension it right there, right? Okay. But in this case, remember the rule is negative cylinders, holes, should be dimensioned in their circular view with a diameter. But I would say that in this case, this dimension pointing to this third circle in this concentric array of circles is a little bit difficult to understand. Okay, so you remember, somebody is going to be reading these dimensions. And I would contend that dimensioning this inner circle right there is going to make it a little bit difficult to figure out what the heck you're talking about, right? And in fact, I'm wrong, because really it should be to this circle right there. All right. You see how easy it is to make that mistake? So what's the remedy for this? Well, being that the dimension rules for dimensioning cylinders and holes are really guidelines, I'm going to dimension in this view. All right. See how I can do that? Now I'm going to move this a little bit out, maybe move it up a little bit, and then I can double click on this and change this to %%C, right? And I would contend that this dimension is much more clear in what we're talking about than this. And so I'm going to get rid of that. All right. So now we need a depth right here. So I'm going to get the depth, and I'm going to pull the depth out from here. Right. So we got to move some things around here. I'm going to click on this and pull this out on that side. And maybe I'll even it up a little bit. It always looks good. It will be appreciated if you make your dimensions look nice and even. Right. So I'll pull this out a little bit. That looks pretty good. Okay. So there's now we have this one here, and this one, this smaller negative cylinder, this smaller hole, we can dimension that there because that's not really ambiguous how that's located there. So we can pull that out there. Of course, it goes all the way through, so I don't need a depth for that. And then last but not least, we have these countersink holes. So I'm going to pull across the CAD standard for countersink, and there it is right there. Right, you can see that right there. So we need a diameter on the small hole, a diameter on the countersink, and then we need that countersink symbol, and then by, whatever it is, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, whatever that's going to be. And let me get some reference dimensions in here first. So the angle between this side and this side is 70. All right, so that's going to be a 70-degree angle. And the diameter on the small hole is 375. All right, so we're ready to go. So I'm going to go to diameter. I'm going to point to the outer circle. I'm going to come down here, right? And then here, let me move this over so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to put that note together, okay? So it's going to go like this. I'm going to double click in there, hit the enter key to go down one line, and then do %C 0.375 through, even though the through is technically not necessary. Put in all your numbers first, and then and that's 70. Now, how do you do the degree symbol? %D. You can see this right up here under symbol, okay? Where is it? Degree, %D, okay? So I can just position that in there and do %D, and there's our thing in there. And then I'm going to position my cursor in front. Whoops, there we go. And go to symbol, other. Sure, AIGDT is fine. Go to Countersink, select copy, close, Control V, backspace, double click, 0.125, close text editor, and then there. Whoops, no, we're not done yet. Sorry, what did I forget? I forgot the by 70. So space X space, right? And of course, I also forgot 3x space. Boy, oh boy, forgot a lot there. All right, so that's it. All right, now you can tell right here I need to move this a little bit, so I'll just move this down right into that little gap right in there. And I can get rid of this reference dimension, and I can get rid of that reference dimension because that was just for me to get the numbers right. And the last thing is this slot, this annular ring right there. So I'm going to dimension that as a feature that's going to have a thickness right there, right? And actually, I'm going to pull that out right there. It is perfectly fine for a dimension line and an extension line to cross right there, okay? If you really didn't want that to occur, there's a couple of things that you could do. You could break it right there. So I'll show you how you can do that. You go to annotate, and then there is the break right there. So we pick that and we want to break this. So I'm going to select, we're going to add a break in there, and then we're going to break it right there. So you see, I picked that first, and then I picked this second. Okay, so we can do that. The alternative is to move this up here, but I don't think I'm going to have room. Ooh, yeah. See, I don't really have a lot of room in there anyway. So I might need to tighten some things up in there. So here, let me do that a little bit. Let's move this a little bit closer there, and we'll move this one. We'll move it right in there like that, and we'll move this a little bit closer in there. I guess I gotta be a little bit more efficient in my space usage. Whoops. There we go. All right, let's see how that looks. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Looks like it's getting it done. If I am careful, I might be able to move this so that I flip these on the inside. There we go, right there. Right, and then I can move this down right there. If I was really being particular, let me show you what I'd do. I'd draw a line from the end right there out through that, and then I would use my grips and move it right there. This is if you had a boss that really was picky about your dimensions lining up. Okay. But we're not so picky here. All right. As long as it looks good. So that's the size dimensions. Now, what's really cool about cylindrical features, cylindrical objects, is a lot of times the locations are already done. So really, everything already has a location relative to the center of the whole part, except for these holes right there. And they're going to be dimensioned on a bolt circle. So we have options for doing that. And again, I'm going to pull this across. We've already talked about this in one of the other videos. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Or maybe we didn't. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we did not talk. Maybe it was in a presentation. Well, anyway, I'll show you how to do that, right? So we're going to dimension this with a bolt circle. So we're going to go to a diameter, and we'll pull this out like this. That's good. And we'll double click on that, and we want to say that this is a bolt circle, so we go BC. That's the abbreviation for bolt circle. And then what we got to do here is we got to add onto the bottom, right, space EQLSP. Okay, equally spaced. That's it. All right, we don't need anything else. Equally spaced is all you need for that, because we're starting right on that 12 o'clock. Now, if these were shifted slightly, then we would need to give the angular shift, so to speak. But because it's not, then we don't need to do that. All right. So that's that. You know, there we go. That's done. Right. There's nothing else to do. We got it all dimensioned, size and location. And we're good to go. All right. So I hope that helps. That was a little bit more complicated, right? But it gave us an opportunity to show you some more symbols and reinforce the getting those in there, and talk a little bit about arranged objects around a perimeter, and then some of the nuances for some of this. Oh, you know what? No, I take that back. I'm not finished yet. I know some of you are going to be. I did not give the depth of the slot. So I'm going to, boy, this is going to get tight in there. So, you know, I'm going to dimension it from this view, because I think this will allow me to see things a little bit better. So I'm going to, I think the only place that I can do that is right here. Maybe I'll pull it on this side. Okay. And since I'm going to put that up there, I'm actually going to delete this. And I'm going to move it up there too. Because I think it's good to have the features dimensioned together. All right. So you see what we have is we have the 0.2 and the 0.12 together. Right. I think that that's good. And it makes it a little bit less messy down there. All right. So now I'm done. All right. So I hope that helps. I'll see you in the next video.